Her pack cast her out to die, but this monster hunter became the Alpha King's salvation. The wind howled through the thick, twisted forest, carrying with it the scent of rain and something far darker. Break. Shadows moved between the trees, flickering like spirits in the moonlight. Amid the silence, a lone figure ran. Her footsteps light but sure, her breath steady despite the chill. Bring. This was no ordinary woman. She was a hunter skilled and sharp, trained to face the creatures that lurked beyond the edges of human settlements. Her name was Leora, though very few still spoke it. Her pack had cast her out weeks ago, calling her a traitor, blaming her for a tragedy that had been no one's fault but the cruel hands of fate. They left her in the forest with nothing but a thin cloak and a dagger, expecting her to die. But Leora survived. She had to. The forest had become her home. The nights were dangerous, filled with creatures that howled and whispered in voices that sounded almost human. Leora had learned their habits, their weaknesses, and she had learned to fight them and to live. Each step she took was measured, cautious, but full of purpose, breath. She had made the wilderness her own, a place where betrayal and pain could not reach her heart, at least not fully. Yet, tonight felt different. The air was heavy with a strange energy, something dark and unnatural. It wasn't just the forest that had changed, it was as if the world itself had shifted. Even the moon seemed muted, as if afraid to shine too brightly. Leora paused, pressing herself against the trunk of an ancient tree. Her senses were alive, every hair on her body standing alert. She had learned to trust instincts above all else, and tonight her instincts screamed that she was not alone. Breath. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the mist. Leora's eyes narrowed. Out of the shadows, a massive wolf-like creature appeared, its fur black as midnight, and eyes glowing like embers. It snarled, exposing fangs that seemed sharper than iron. Leora tightened her grip on her dagger, her heart steady. She had faced monsters before, but this one was different. It carried an intelligence, a malice that made the hair on her arms rise. The creature lunged. Leora dodged, rolling over the wet earth, and struck with her dagger. Brash. The silvered blade sank into its shoulder, and the beast howled in pain. Yet it did not flee. Instead, it circled, testing her, eyes locked on hers. Every hunter knows that moment, the instant when life and death hang by a thread. Leora's mind sharpened. She struck again, aiming not just to wound, but to drive it back. A sudden movement from the trees caught her eye. Another presence, silent but commanding. From the mist emerged a man, tall and imposing, his black cloak flowing behind him. His eyes were piercing, sharp as daggers, yet there was a sorrow in them that made the shadows seem smaller in his presence. Leora recognized him not by face, but by aura. He was no ordinary man. He was the Alpha King. Tales of his power and rule had reached even the smallest villages, whispered by terrified people who had never seen him but knew his reputation. The Alpha moved with a grace that made him seem almost part of the shadows themselves. Without a word, he extended a hand and the beast froze, snarling, its aggression faltering. Leora blinked. She had heard legends of the Alpha King, of his strength, but she had never imagined the reality. His presence alone could command even the wildest creatures. The wolf lunged again, but the Alpha acted faster. A flash of movement, and the creature collapsed, subdued but alive. He turned to Leora, his eyes narrowing. "You should not be here," he said, his voice deep, carrying authority and an unspoken warning.
"I could say the same to you," Leora replied, her tone steady, refusing to show fear.
"I kill what should be killed." I survive. The Alpha studied her for a moment, as if weighing her worth, her courage, and perhaps something deeper. Then he nodded, slowly. Perhaps you do more than survive, he said, almost to himself. Perhaps you could be of use. Leora did not trust him. Few had earned her trust in years. Yet in that moment, she felt something she had not felt since her pack had betrayed her. A flicker of hope. Maybe survival had brought her not just to life, but to destiny. Before either of them could speak further, the forest trembled. A chilling roar echoed through the trees, louder than before. Leora's heart skipped. The ground beneath their feet quivered. "It's not over," she whispered. No, the Alpha agreed, his jaw tight. This forest hides more than shadows. There are forces here that even I cannot control.
Leora realized then that the danger was far greater than a single beast.
Something ancient, something cursed, stirred in the darkness. And they were in its path. The Alpha moved closer to her, his cloak brushing against her arm. The heat of his presence was strange, almost unsettling. Leora's instincts told her to step back, to keep her distance. But there was also a protective power in him. Something that made her feel, for the first time, that she was not entirely alone. Break. Suddenly, from the corner of the clearing, a dark figure emerged, tall, thin, cloaked in shadows. Leora's heart sank. Recognition hit her like a knife. One of her former pack members, the one who had pushed for her exile, stepped forward, eyes cold and cruel. Behind them moved smaller figures, members of the same pack, their faces hidden by hoods. "You survived longer than expected," the figure said, voice like ice. "We thought the forest would take you, but perhaps it is not too late to finish what we started." Leora's grip on her dagger tightened. "I am no longer your prey," she said. "You cannot touch me." The pack hesitated, sensing the presence of the Alpha King behind her. They had heard tales of his wrath, and for the first time doubt flickered in their eyes. But hatred is a powerful motivator. One of them stepped forward with a blade, and the air around them seemed to darken, shadows stretching unnaturally. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed, and his voice cut through the tension like a sword. "Enough." Even the wind seemed to pause. The pack froze, as if the words themselves held power. The Alpha advanced, his steps deliberate, and Leora realized that they were not alone against the darkness. This man, this king, could be her ally. But at what cost? Before she could ponder further, the shadows around them shifted violently. The cursed energy in the forest erupted, and a massive, unnatural creature burst from the trees. Its body was twisted, with limbs that bent unnaturally and eyes that glowed with hatred. It was bigger than any beast Leora had faced, faster and stronger, with a growl that shook the very air. Her former pack screamed, trying to flee, but the creature moved too quickly. Leora's instincts took over. She leapt forward, striking with her dagger, aiming for its eyes. The creature howled in pain but did not retreat. It struck back, swiping its massive claw. Leora barely rolled out of the way, pain shooting up her arm. The Alpha moved like a shadow, cutting through the beast's attack with speed that was almost inhuman, a silent understanding forming between them. Leora realized that in all her years, she had never fought alongside someone who could match her skill, someone who made her feel both terrified and alive. Finally, with a coordinated strike, they subdued the creature. It collapsed, writhing, then vanished into a shadowy mist, leaving the clearing eerily silent. The pack members were gone, fleeing into the forest, leaving only whispers of fear behind. Leora fell to her knees, breathing heavily, staring at the Alpha King. He looked at her, expression unreadable, yet his eyes held a flicker of respect. Des, you are stronger than I imagined, he said quietly. And you are. Not what I expected, she replied, still wary. I survive because I must. I do not trust easily. Nor should you, he said, almost smiling. But for now, you have survived tonight. That is enough. The forest around them was quiet once more, but both of them knew that this was only the beginning. Darkness lingered, waiting, watching, testing, breath for dead. But perhaps the forest had led her to something more, something dangerous, something that could change everything. The Alpha turned to leave, but stopped and looked back at her. There will be more, he said. The curse that haunts my people, it is awakening. And I will need every ally I can find. Leora's heart clenched. Desperate, she did not know if she could trust him, or even herself, but something deep inside told her that her life had changed forever. The hunt was no longer just for survival. It was for destiny. As the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and shadow, Leora stood and followed the Alpha King into the darkness, knowing that her journey had only just begun. And somewhere deep in the forest, eyes glowed, watching them both, waiting for the moment when the curse would strike again. The night had not ended, it had only begun. The mist hung heavy over the castle of the Alpha King, curling around the black stone walls like a living thing. It was a place of power, shadow, and history, where the weight of curses and ancient magic lingered in every corner. Leora had never seen anything like it before. The gates loomed high, carved with symbols she did not understand, and guards clad in dark armor moved silently, their eyes sharp as hawks. The forest behind her seemed almost distant now, a place she had survived, but it already felt like a different world. She walked beside the Alpha King, silent but alert. His presence was imposing, his aura powerful, yet there was something quietly tender in the way he moved, an intensity that went beyond strength. Leora had faced monsters, outlived her pack's betrayal, and fought for survival against death itself. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, and she did not trust herself. Stay close, the Alpha said, his voice low and commanding, yet carrying a strange warmth that made her muscles relax slightly. The castle is safe from ordinary threats, but not from the curse that haunts my people. Curse? What do you mean? She asked. Her curiosity was cautious, dangerous curiosity, because she had learned that questions could sometimes cost more than answers. He stopped, turning to face her. Moonlight touched his face, revealing the sharp line of his jaw and the depth of his eyes. My family carries a shadow, he said, breath. A power that was once a blessing, but now has become a curse. It feeds on fear and anger, and it grows stronger with every act of death and betrayal. Soon, it will consume everything, including me. Leora swallowed hard. She had encountered darkness before, in creatures twisted by malice or hunger, but the idea of a curse that consumed not just the body, but the soul, it sent a shiver down her spine. Yet she also felt a strange understanding. She had been marked by betrayal herself, left alone to face the world. Perhaps this was why she had survived. Perhaps she had always been meant to meet him. The Alpha led her through winding corridors, past tapestries that depicted long-forgotten battles, and into a grand hall lit by flickering torches. The air smelled faintly of smoke and old wood, mingled with the scent of something metallic, like iron. The hall was vast, with high ceilings and walls lined with statues of warriors, wolves, and kings long gone. "This will be your temporary home," he said, breath, "until we find a way to stop what is coming."
Leora studied him carefully. "Temporary?" she asked.
The word held a weight she did not like. She had been given nothing by her pack, forced into exile, and now she was offered shelter by someone she barely knew.
"I do not stay where I am not wanted. You are wanted here," he replied simply.
"Perhaps more than you know." The words made her pause. She had learned to rely only on herself, to trust no one. Yet something in the way he said it, without pleading, without arrogance, made her believe him just a little. Their time together in the castle began quietly. Leora trained patrolling the outer walls, studying the creatures that slipped into the edges of the forest. She taught the Alpha's guards how to move silently, how to strike with precision. In return, he shared the history of his family, the curse that had haunted his lineage for generations, and the power he wielded to keep it in check. The castle itself seemed alive, as if it listened to their conversations and echoed with their footsteps. Leora felt the weight of centuries pressing down. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt part of something larger than herself, a purpose beyond survival. But the darkness outside did not rest. Trapped at the edges of the forest, and strange creatures twisted by the curse tested the castle's defenses nightly. One evening, while Leora practiced her aim with throwing knives in the courtyard, a screech echoed through the air. Breath. She spun, spotting a monstrous figure racing across the misty grounds, a creature with too many limbs and eyes that burned like fire. The Alpha appeared beside her without warning, moving faster than humanly possible. Together they fought, their movements synchronized, almost instinctive. Leora was aware of the power he held, the strength that was both terrifying and captivating. And in that moment, when their hands brushed while dispatching the creature, her heart thumped fiercely. She told herself it was not fear or desire, it was instinct, adrenaline. But even she knew there was more than that. Bears. After the fight, the Alpha studied the remains of the creature. "It grows stronger," he said, "and it will not stop until it consumes us all. This is only the beginning."
Leora nodded, gripping her dagger tightly. "Then we fight," she said.
Her voice was steady, but inside her mind was restless. Something about the curse. It felt connected to her past, to the exile, to the pack that had left her to die. It was only a few nights later that the truth began to unravel. While exploring the castle's library, a vast room filled with books, scrolls, and ancient artifacts, Leora found a parchment that chilled her blood. It detailed an event from years ago, a creature that had terrorized villages and vanished mysteriously. The description matched a monster she had once fought as a child, a creature she had believed she had destroyed. Her fingers trembled as she read further. The text implied that the monster had been tied to the curse of the Alpha King's bloodline. And more disturbingly, it suggested that her actions as a child had unknowingly strengthened the curse, weaving her fate into his. When the Alpha appeared behind her, she did not speak immediately. You mean this curse," she said finally. "It is connected to me?" His eyes softened, but the weight in them remained. "In ways neither of us could have predicted," he said. "Fate has a way of choosing its players carefully. You survived exile. You fought monsters. And yet, you were always part of this story." Leora's mind raced. Betrayal, exile, monsters, curses, everything had led to this. And now she understood why she had been cast out. Not punishment, but preparation. The forest had been harsh, but it had made her ready for what was to come. The Alpha King placed a hand on her shoulder. firm but not controlling. "I cannot fight this alone," he said quietly. "I need you." She looked at him, conflicted. Part of her wanted to refuse, to run, to remain a lone hunter who trusted no one. But another part, one she had buried deep within herself, wanted to stand beside him. To fight not just for survival, but for something greater. Before she could answer, a sudden scream echoed through the castle. Leora and the Alpha ran toward it, finding one of the servants cornered by a monstrous figure, its body writhing unnaturally, eyes glowing red. The Alpha struck first, but the creature was faster than any ordinary monster. Leora moved instinctively, her dagger flashing in the torchlight, striking with precision. They fought side by side, their movements perfectly aligned, each protecting the other without speaking. The connection between them was undeniable, unspoken but intense. And yet, in the heat of the battle, both realized something terrifying. The creature was not acting alone. The curse was awakening, and its power was spreading faster than they had imagined. After the creature vanished into the shadows, the Alpha turned to her.
"This is only the beginning," he said, voice low.
Breaths. "Soon the curse will reach beyond the castle walls. You must be ready."
Leora's heart pounded, not from fear but from anticipation, and something she could not name.
She had been cast out, left for dead, and yet here she was, standing beside the most powerful man in the kingdom, facing darkness that could destroy everything. She realized then that she was no longer a lone hunter. She was part of a story far greater than herself, a story woven with danger, magic, and destiny. And in the quiet moments after the fight, when the castle was still, Leora felt the weight of the Alpha King's gaze. It was not just curiosity or respect. It was something deeper, something that mirrored the stirrings in her own heart. She did not trust it fully, nor did she understand it yet. But she knew that this connection would change her life forever. That night, as the wind howled around the castle towers, Leora stood at the edge of the battlements, staring into the misty forest beyond. She thought of her pack, of the betrayal that had nearly killed her, and of the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. She realized that survival was no longer enough. She needed purpose. She needed to fight, to protect, to stand beside someone who could see her for who she truly was. The Alpha King appeared silently beside her, his cloak brushing against her arm. "You are ready," he said softly. "But the forest is restless. The curse is awake, and soon it will demand a price." Leora turned to him, eyes steady. "Then we pay it together," she said. And in that moment, neither of them spoke, yet the bond between them grew stronger, a bond forged in darkness, in battle, and in the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came next, together. The forest beyond the castle whispered with the sounds of creatures unseen, of shadows that moved with purpose. And somewhere deep in the night, a howl echoed, a reminder that the curse was not finished. It was only gathering strength, and when it struck again, it would strike harder than ever before. For now they stood together, ready. The darkness had awakened, but so had they. The forest beyond the castle was darker than ever. Shadows stretched like living hands, and the air was thick with a sense of danger that made Leora's skin prickle. Even after months of surviving alone, even after fighting creatures that no ordinary human could face, tonight felt different. The curse that haunted the Alpha King's lands was growing stronger. It had tasted fear, and it hungered for more. Leora walked carefully, her dagger in hand, eyes scanning the mist. The Alpha King moved beside her, silent and alert, his presence a comforting weight against the cold night. Together they had tracked the source of the disturbances, a place deep within the cursed woods where the air shimmered unnaturally and the ground pulsed as if alive. "This way," the Alpha whispered, pointing to a narrow path winding between twisted trees. "The curse has a heart. If we can reach it, we can end it, or at least weaken it."
Leora nodded, her mind tense.
She had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. A forest seemed alive, watching their every move, waiting for a mistake. She shivered, though not entirely from the cold. Hours passed as they navigated the twisting path. Shadows moved along the edges of their vision, and strange sounds echoed from deep within the trees. Voices that whispered in languages she did not know, calling her name, mocking her, testing her courage. Leora clenched her jaw and focused on each step. She had learned long ago that fear could be a hunter's enemy, and she would not let it control her tonight. At last, they reached a clearing. The ground was blackened, cracked, and pulsing with a faint red glow. In the center stood a creature of nightmare, a twisted figure with multiple arms, its face hidden beneath a mask of shadow. Its eyes gleamed like molten gold, and the air around it shimmered with power. This was the heart of the curse. The creature moved with unnatural speed, launching itself toward them. Leora leapt forward, striking with her dagger, but the creature twisted, almost anticipating her move. The Alpha King intercepted with a single sweep of his hand, sending the creature stumbling back. Their movements were instinctive, practiced, almost as if they were two halves of the same force. "You fight well," the Alpha said, his voice low, close enough that Leora could feel the warmth of it. "But we must act together." "Trust me, I do," she said, though her heart hammered fiercely, not just from the fight but from being near him, from feeling that strange pull she could not name. She had survived exile, faced death countless times, and yet this connection terrified her more than any monster ever could. The battle was relentless. The creature struck with blinding speed, forcing them to move as one. Leora ducked, rolled, struck, while the Alpha countered with power she could barely comprehend. Sparks of energy lit the night as their attacks clashed with the curse's strength. Hours, or perhaps minutes, for time seemed to lose meaning, passed. Finally, they forced the creature back, cornering it against the blackened earth. Leora's dagger found its mark in one of the creature's limbs, and the Alpha's power surged, binding it in shimmering chains of light and shadow. The creature roared, a sound that shook the trees, then vanished into the night, leaving only silence behind. They both stood, breathing heavily, hearts racing, not just from the fight, but from the intensity of the moment. Leora looked at him, and for a moment she saw something beyond the Alpha King's stoic exterior. She saw fear, yes, but also hope, and perhaps longing. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face, searching, almost gentle. I am," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. She did not admit that her chest felt tight, that her mind refused to stop replaying the way they had moved together, the way their hands had brushed, the way his presence had anchored her in a way no one else ever had. The Alpha King studied her quietly, then nodded. "Good. But the fight is not over. The curse is weakening, yes, but it has spread beyond this clearing. We will face more. And each time, it will grow stronger. You must be ready." Leora swallowed hard. She had known this would not be easy. Every moment in the forest, every battle had prepared her for survival. But this was about more than survival. Breaths, this was about destiny, about something bigger than herself, something that intertwined her fate with the Alpha Kings in ways she could not yet understand. As they moved deeper into the woods, Leora began to understand the weight of what they faced. Breath. Each step brought a new trial, a new shadow, a new fear. And yet, with every challenge, she felt her own strength growing. Brie. She was no longer the hunted outcast. She was a hunter in her own right, standing beside a king, facing darkness with courage she had never known she possessed. But even as they fought, the past would not let her go. Thoughts of her pack, of the betrayal that had cast her out, haunted her. Why had they left her to die, and why after all these years did it feel as though the curse itself had drawn her here? She could not answer these questions, but she knew she had to keep moving forward. The Alpha seemed to sense her turmoil. "You are thinking of your past," he said softly. "You cannot change it, but you can choose what comes next. Choose to fight, to stand, to survive, to be more than they ever imagined." Breaths. I will try," she said, though her voice lacked certainty. Deep down she knew she could not simply try. She had to succeed, not just for herself, but for him, for the kingdom, for all who depended on them. The night wore on, and they came to the edge of a cliff overlooking a black river that glowed faintly red in the moonlight. The curse's energy pulsed from the river like a heartbeat, strong and relentless. Leora's stomach tightened. She knew that this was where the final test awaited, the heart of the curse itself, where shadows took form, where fear became real, and where destiny would demand everything from them both. The Alpha turned to her, his eyes softening in the faint light. "I need you to trust me," he said. "No matter what happens, we face this together." "Do you trust me?" Leora hesitated, but then nodded. I trust you." "Good," he said, and together they stepped toward the river's edge. The air shimmered and shadows rose from the water, forming shapes of people and monsters, all twisted by fear and anger. Leora recognized some of them, faces from her past. Her pack, the monsters she had fought. They moved to attack, but she did not flinch. She raised her dagger ready, and beside her the Alpha summoned his power, a glow of shadow and light that wrapped around them both like a shield. The battle that followed was unlike anything Leora had faced. Shadows lunged, shapes shifted, and for every strike they made, more seemed to rise from the river. Yet through it all, she moved as one with the Alpha King, their strength combining in ways she had never imagined. Each time her dagger struck, each time his power surged, the curse recoiled slightly, and hope flickered like a fragile flame. But victory was not easy. The curse fed on fear, and as the shadows intensified, Leora felt her own fear rising. Memories of betrayal, of exile, of loneliness threatened to overwhelm her. Her hands trembled. Her mind faltered, and for the first time in a long while, she questioned whether she could survive this night. The Alpha sensed it immediately. He moved to her side, his hand brushing hers as he whispered, "You are stronger than you know." "Trust yourself. Trust me." The words grounded her. She drew a deep breath, centering herself, and together they struck the final blow. Light and shadow collided, and the cursed river shuddered violently before settling into stillness. The shadows dissipated, leaving only silence, broken only by the sound of their breathing. They both sank to their knees, exhausted, hearts pounding. Leora looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel the depth of what had passed between them, not just in battle, but in trust, in connection, in unspoken understanding. The Alpha King's gaze softened. "You have faced the darkness," he said. "And you have survived it. You are not the same woman who wandered into my forest months ago. You are stronger, braver, and not alone." Leora swallowed, emotions swirling inside her. She had been cast out, left to die, and yet here she was, standing beside a king, facing darkness and surviving. She had found a purpose, a place, and perhaps a bond that could not be broken. And yet, even in the quiet aftermath, a new fear emerged. The curse was weakened, yes, but it had not been destroyed. Something deeper, something older, still lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As dawn began to break, the Alpha King helped her to her feet. Together they looked out over the forest, its mists slowly lifting to reveal the world below. For a moment, there was peace. For a moment, hope. But somewhere in the distance, a howl echoed, a sound colder, sharper, and more menacing than anything they had faced. The curse had not finished with them. It was only preparing for the next trial, and when it came, it would demand everything from them both. Leora's grip on her dagger tightened. The journey was far from over. And as she looked at the Alpha King standing strong beside her, she knew one thing for certain: whatever darkness awaited, they would face it together. The forest had tested them. The curse had tried to break them, but they had survived. And the heart of the battle, the heart of both fear and destiny, was still to come. The dawn was pale and fragile, spilling light over the blackened forest like hope threading through despair. Leora stood at the edge of the castle balcony, the cold wind tugging at her cloak, her eyes scanning the mists that still clung to the trees. She had survived exile, monsters, betrayal, and the trials of the cursed forest, but the weight of what lay ahead pressed on her chest like iron. Beside her, the Alpha King watched the horizon, silent and unreadable. There was a tension in his shoulders, a quiet storm that no one could see, yet she felt it in every pulse of his presence. For months they had fought together, moved together, bled together. Bration. And yet he had never let his guard down, not fully.
You are thinking too much, he said softly, his voice like a shadow brushing against her ear.
The curse is stronger than either of us alone. It waits for fear, for doubt, for weakness. We must face it together now before it spreads beyond this land. Leora turned to him, her eyes steady despite the tremor in her chest. I am ready, she said. I have to be. Not just for myself, for you, for the people, for everyone who cannot fight.
He regarded her for a long moment, the weight of centuries reflected in his gaze.
Breaths. Then he nodded. Then we go. Bay. And whatever happens, we face it as one. The journey led them to the heart of the ancient forest, where the air was thick with power and the ground pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost alive. Ray. Trees twisted unnaturally, their branches reaching like hands, their roots coiling above the earth like serpents. This was where the curse had grown strongest, a place older than the castle, older than any living memory. Leora's breath caught as she stepped forward, dagger in hand, her senses alert. The forest seemed to recognize her presence, twisting, shifting, shadows darting in and out of the corner of her eyes. The Alpha King moved beside her, calm and deliberate, yet she could sense the storm beneath his control. Breaks out of town. Every step they took brought them closer to the source and closer to the truth of what had haunted him for generations. At last, they arrived at a clearing unlike any Leora had seen before. A black stone altar rose from the center of the earth, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Around it, shadows swirled and twisted, forming faces and shapes that seemed both human and monstrous. The curse awaited them, ancient and relentless, ready to strike. The Alpha King stepped forward, his presence commanding, his power radiating in waves that made the air shimmer. Verse. This is it, he said, voice low but unwavering. The heart of the curse. It will fight us. It will test us.
but we are stronger together.
Leora took a deep breath, steadying herself.
She had feared countless monsters, survived betrayals and hunts in the dead of night. But this was the ultimate test. And yet, as she glanced at the Alpha King, she felt a strange calm. They were not alone. They were not weak. Together they could face the impossible. The curse erupted, shadows twisting into forms more terrifying than anything Leora had faced. Respective glances, faces contorted in fear and rage, eyes glowing with unnatural fire. They moved with a purpose, striking with speed and strength that made her muscles scream. But Leora did not hesitate. She moved with precision, her dagger flashing through the air, each strike finding its mark. The Alpha King unleashed his power, weaving light and shadow into shields and weapons. Striking with a force that bent reality itself, they moved as one, instinctively, each anticipating the other's next move, each protecting the other as if their lives depended on it. Because they did. Hours, or perhaps minutes, for time lost meaning in the midst of battle, passed. They fought not just the creatures, but the fear within themselves. Every doubt, every memory of betrayal, every thought of weakness was turned into strength. Leora drew courage from the Alpha's unwavering presence, and he drew power from her fierce heart. Finally, they reached the altar. Inspiration. The shadows recoiled, swirling in a vortex of dark energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Leora looked at him, her eyes wide but resolute. "This ends now," she said, voice strong. He nodded. "Together," he replied. They stepped onto the altar, hands touching briefly, a spark of power surging between them. It was more than strength. It was trust, understanding, and the bond that had grown between them over months of struggle. The curse reacted, striking at them with everything it had, but they held firm, facing it together. Leora closed her eyes, calling upon everything she had learned, the hunts, the battles, the pain of exile, the courage that had carried her this far. She let it flow into the Alpha King, into their shared power, into the moment, Brask. And then, with a surge of energy, light and shadow collided in a blinding explosion that sent the cursed forces scattering. When the light faded, silence fell over the forest. The altar was still, the shadows gone, and the cursed energy that had pulsed like a heartbeat was now quiet. Leora opened her eyes, breathing heavily, and saw the Alpha King standing beside her, his hand extended. We did it," she said, voice trembling with relief and awe. And he nodded, a rare, soft smile touching his lips. "Yes, together." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The curse was broken. The forest was quiet, as if acknowledging their victory. Leora felt a weight lift from her chest, not just the battle but the burden of her past, the pain of betrayal, the loneliness that had followed her for so long. The Alpha King looked at her, his gaze deep and unwavering. Not just for me, but for this land, for everyone who lives.
You are remarkable.
Leora's heart fluttered, and she took a tentative step closer.
I could not have done it alone.
And neither could you. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
"No," he said softly. "We are stronger together. Bet. And we are more than that, I think." She felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she had never allowed herself before. Hope, trust, and something deeper. route. She met his gaze, searching for truth, for honesty, for a connection she could finally rely on. I never thought I would belong anywhere, she whispered. But here, with you, I feel like I have a place. He took her hand, holding it firmly. Then stay. Not as a guest, not as a protector, but as someone who is important to me, to us. Breath caught. She had spent years alone, surviving, fighting, and hiding from the world. But now, standing beside the man who had saved her, beside the man who had trusted her and fought with her, she understood what it meant to truly belong. For the first time in her life, she let herself feel it, all the fear, all the pain, all the longing, and turned it into something stronger. Courage, love, hope. The forest seemed to acknowledge it, the wind whispering through the trees, carrying away the remnants of shadow and fear. The curse was gone, but its memory lingered, a reminder that darkness always exists, but it can be overcome. The Alpha King and Leora stood together, hand in hand, looking out over the forest that they had saved. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky in golds and pinks, a promise of renewal and peace. They had faced the impossible, survived and emerged stronger. But even as they stood in victory, a distant sound reached their ears, a soft, haunting howl, faint but unmistakable. The curse had been broken, but the world was still full of dangers, still full of shadows that tested the brave. Leora squeezed the Alpha's hand, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She had survived exile, monsters, and betrayal. She had faced the heart of darkness and emerged stronger, braver, and ready for whatever fate would throw at them. And the Alpha King for the first time allowed himself to feel the fullness of what it meant to trust, to love, and to hope. Big, he had found his salvation, not just for his people, but in her. Together they turned from the forest and walked back toward the castle, toward life, toward a future that neither had dared imagine before. The wind carried the scent of dawn fresh and clean, and Leora felt it in her lungs, a reminder that even after darkness, light can always return. The journey had ended, but their story was only beginning. Brit. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the world whispered a quiet truth. Love and courage are stronger than any curse, stronger than any darkness, and together they could face whatever came next.